There are many great mysteries that have been deemed unsolvable by many, questions claimed unanswerable by the knowledgeable who answer things. How big is the universe, really? Why do K-pop fans always seem to act with the utmost insanity? Will Mars Toys ever release the Renegade project after the factory closed and stole all their money? And why, especially in the Voyager scale, do Transformers fans always purchase more and more Optimus Primes, despite at least owning a few dozen from years prior? It's because they're f***ing cool. Comparing 2018 to 2019 is like comparing chalk and cheese. 2018 was an incredibly lackluster year, especially for Generations. Power of the Primes was by far the worst Generations line since... well, okay, maybe not that bad. With no clear focus, gimmicks being forced up everyone's butts regardless of whether they worked or not, and just the character selection that should have worked, but just didn't. And then Studio Series was okay, but compared to this year, they were playing it kinda safe as they were still finding their footing. Now compare that to this year, and oh ho 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 ho! Yeah, Cyberverse is still finding its footing a little bit. But Siege honestly still has maybe a couple of flops here and there. It's still churning out quality figure after quality figure after quality figure. I think one of the best signs of how prosperous this year has been is the addition of two of potentially the best Voyager Optimus Primes we've ever gotten. Yes, I'm aware that in some markets Siege Optimus Prime came out in 2018, but not in Australia, so I'm not considering him a 2018 toy. The question is, which of these is better? Well, there's been several forum posts and comments across multiple websites debating which of these is the true best Optimus Prime in recent memory. And yes, it is important to realise that the fact that we've got two great Optimus Primes in one year is brilliant, but I wanted to answer the question, at least personally, for a very long time now. And so, I think it's time we...
Optimus Prime? You reviewed an Optimus Prime last episode! Are you doing it? I don't... my spleen! Ow!
Okay, first off, that was for ratting my ass out to the Pokemon Company a couple of weeks ago. And second, that was Powered Convoy, not Optimus Prime. And third, it's my channel, I can do whatever the hell I want. So, with all that said and done, greetings Cybertronians, I'm Dr. Lockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Siege Optimus Prime versus SS38 Studio Series Optimus Prime. Okay, so in vehicle mode we have a new and innovative take on the classic G1 Optimus Prime cab, and a much more faithful adaptation of the 80s source material. Wait, hang on a second, did the lines get mixed up? It's not really something you notice in a vacuum, but it is odd that the Siege version takes more liberties in vehicle mode than the Studio Series one. This is far from a criticism though, it's just a thing to point out. Anyway, I suppose we should go in release order. Siege Optimus Prime looks like something right out of one of the Blade Runner movies or various spin-off media. Yes, I'm still going with the Cyberpunk comparison. All in all, I'm a little conflicted how I'm supposed to feel with this. It's definitely a solid little truck, and the sculpt and paintwork are genius. It's far from the best alt mode in the line, but I really must reiterate how good it is to have surface detail back after the obsession with toon flatness that permeated Power of the Primes, despite having toyetic color schemes. Really, how was that supposed to work? In a nutshell, it is good. But I feel they're being a little reserved in how far they deviate from the source material. I absolutely love what they've done with the cab section, the grille design to the floodlights to the hidden gasoline guns in place of headlights. It oozes the concept of war for Cybertron. Well, at least after you've disassociated the term from the games. Seriously, why the f*** do you keep reusing fiction names, Hasbro? In the end though, I do feel that the designers could have gone a lot further with some of their stylings. What we have here is pretty damn good, but it's lacking that extra push into a truly stylized alt mode. It's got 1 foot in the source material and 1 foot in true inspiration, and I feel it should have gone a bit further. Take the weathering detail for instance. Where it's applied, it looks lovely, but as far as the sides of the cab are concerned, there really needs to be more. I'm aware that modern Transformers in general are far more restricted to budgets and the like, but in this case it doesn't feel that strategic about where they put this effect. Maybe if they hadn't wasted the money on the transformable weapons, it might have worked. Oh yeah, weapon storage. Aside from the somewhat ridiculous 5mm ports all over his body, he can also put the gun and folded up axe together, and of course it looks ridiculous. Now weapon storage usually isn't a thing that I bring up because lack thereof really isn't a flaw and more of a stylistic choice to focus on other aspects, but considering this is a Versus review, I think it is important to bring it up this time anyway. One thing I do find fault with is the back section. Hasbro put all the effort into making a clean and cohesive backpack during transformation, but none of this brilliant engineering folds up onto the back of the truck. Whilst I appreciate appreciate the fold-out panels on the knees, which nicely reveals the extra 5mm ports, the end result is scrappy. The original Classics Prime negated this with a brilliant transforming weapon idea, and whilst I understand this is going for its own thing, Siege Prime also has transformable weapons, and given that it's also trying to be the definitive Chug Optimus Prime, comparisons have to be made. Yes, this was parts forming, but it was inventive parts forming, and given how the smokestacks are a little short already, it's something that could potentially work really well. Still, I will say that in the grand scheme of things, the slight lack of weathering in the gappy back section are but a couple of dead LEDs on a giant billboard. There's a lot to love here, and overall, it's a really solid alt mode. The last flat-nosed Optimus Prime that was this good in the Generations line was... Nope. That's not even Generations. Ew, definitely nope. I mean, it's alright, but it's not that great. Oh god, no! Huh. The last flat-nosed Generations Optimus Prime that we got of this caliber was the original Classics release. If I hadn't already done a customs video of it, I'd probably be comparing those two. Regardless, it is a good truck mode. I'm really happy that they even chose to go with this out-there vehicle mode. Sure, it's not as out there as it could have been, but credit where credit is due. At least it fits the aesthetic of the line and gives us something other than G1 truck cab. Oi! Repro labels! Stop that! Oh, and before I move on, apparently the Japanese designers wanted Prime to have a hover mode. This looks bloody ridiculous and I will never mention it again. Now, Studio Series SS38 Optimus Prime goes for a much more G1 approach, as did his on-screen counterparts. Wait a minute, something's wrong here. Yeah, you may notice that the truck mode isn't actually accurate to the truck shown at the end of the movie. As is the case with 3 out of the 4 early Bumblebee toys, not counting the car version of Dropkick because it was likely designed much later, they were based on pre-production concept art, and as such, discrepancies are bound to happen. Bumblebee inexplicably has wings, Shadow has a visor that's only seen in one frame, and Optimus Prime, aside from the alt mode, also has different feet. Matter of fact, if you go outside the Studio Series, pretty much every Optimus Prime from the extended Bumblebee line is based on the Age of Extinction truck, like the case here, or another truck entirely. Well, I guess the eventual movie masterpiece version will be accurate. Wonder if it'll be as good as the Toy World version. Personally, I never cared for accuracy though, so such a thing is inconsequential for me. What we do have, as I said earlier, is actually based on the model seen in Age of Extinction, ironically making the truck mode more accurate than the Evasion toy. As far as first impressions go, the truck mode is just astonishing. It's not the G1 accuracy that has me in such high spirits, it is the sheer level of detail. Siege Prime has somewhat of a softer plastic that makes some of the details get washed away, whereas SS38 is riddled with crisp and precise rivets and runners. Siege Prime's white stripes barely go to the sides of the truck, whereas SS38s are thicker, more defined, and go all the way to the back. Granted, they are silver as opposed to white, but in the end it does the job well on so many levels. And hey, they didn't cut paint costs with the window colours. Although not clear, they do match perfectly. Can't say the same for Siege Prime with the oddity of silver and blue windows. Just pick one! Now yes, due to the somewhat excessive engineering, the roof does come across as a bit panelly, but honestly I've been able to forgive some more extreme circumstances prior, so criticizing him for that would be somewhat ridiculous. One thing you might attempt to criticize is the hollowness of the legs, but here's the thing, that's actually accurate to how trucks usually are. You see all of these? Yeah, that's not how trucks work. As Transformers fans, we've somewhat come to accept that the backs of trucks will usually be inaccurate, just as we accept the undersides of Seekers or the backpacks of the Dinobots, but I'll be damned if I hear criticism for something that's actually attempting to be accurate. Siege Optimus Prime gets a pass though, because he's a space truck. I'm not a monster. One thing that I can criticize about the back section though is the panel system behind the cab. Yes, it's very well engineered, but it could have been a little better. Not only does it jut out, but it's hollow from several angles, and the positioning of the smokestacks is pretty piss poor. Yes, I get it, it's for the sake of the robot mode, but it is still disappointing. It's basically one tiny blemish on an otherwise great package, but the overall experience expects you to adore it since it sets off the entire process, and yet the stage never learns from its actions. Wait, why does this seem familiar? Now, don't you look at me like that. You aren't worthy of getting a pet like a good boy. You are far from a good boy. You know what you did. You don't even feel remorse for what you did. You're so caught up in your selfishness that you can't even comprehend the damage you've done. You're no good boy. See, this is a good boy. This is the goodest boy I know. You're nothing compared to him. Nothing. You're just a f***ing bitch. Another thing easily criticized is that the bumper section seems to have developed an untab fetish, and there seems to be no cure for it. I mean, if you're careful it stays in place, but one slight knock and there's no way it's keeping its pants up. That's one thing I'll give the Siege version. He is one solid vehicle mode, everything remains 100% tabbed in. SS38 is definitely more wibbly, parts are more likely to come undone, and in order to get him all tabbed in, a lot of panel massaging is required. Also, this is more of a nitpick, but given how many Studio Series have this issue, I feel I need to bring this up. Where the f*** is the Autobot symbol? Why is it the Studio Series figure, after Studio Series figure, after Studio Series figure, forgoes its bot and con symbols? Is this a budget thing? Is it for the sake of accuracy? Do I give a shit? No! Put your damn faction symbols on it! Still, faults and all, that leaves us with two quite spiffy alt modes. The question is, which one is categorically better? Well, comparing them side by sides, they both excel and fail in different categories. I mean, sure, SS38 definitely feels weightier, but that doesn't devalue the Siege Optimus. I suppose it comes down to this. Which is better? A toy that aims lower and reaches the bars it sets with ease, or a toy that's more ambitious and doesn't quite hit the marks that it planned on hitting? In my mind, fortune favours the bold. Yes, some of the concepts SS38 tries to pull off aren't completely nailed, such as the solidity and the way that the back cleans up, but the result carries a lot more personality and gravitas. Don't confuse this for G1 nostalgia, they both deviate from the source material in different ways. It's just that something about the realism of SS38 really gets to me. Size-wise, you really do get a feeling that Siege Prime is a little undersized. It's not something you'd really notice in a vacuum though. Siege Prime definitely fills out his size class quite well, it's just next to the sheer chunkitude of SS38, well, something seems a little off. So I've heard that some people are trying to say that these two have a very similar transformation. That simply is not true. These two are very, very different in how they operate. So the first thing you want to do is open up these feet over here. You need to make sure you bring these panels out before you actually start transforming the rest of the cab. You also need to make sure the wheels come down, otherwise the entire transformation won't work either. The windows open up like so, and very nice touch with the Matrix of Leadership, even if it doesn't actually appear in the robot mode. Take this side panel here and open it up, and also open up the gasoline gun on the side here. Bring this entire front section up like so. Bring up the head. You do the whole Optimus arm swing out thingamabob like usual. The Gatling guns fold into the arm. The panels fold down like so. Now make sure the head is fully extended before the wheels fold into the torso, otherwise it's not actually going to have enough clearance in there. Take this entire section down like that. Fold down these sections here. Bumper section folds in. Side panels fold over the top. Entire section folds back like that. Rotate it 180 degrees. 2 slots here and 2 tabs there, and it uses the double hinge to fold on like that to make a very cohesive backpack. Separate the legs like so. Bring down the wheels. Now, if you want to be like the Takara stock photography, these just stay in like that, but if you actually want to transform it properly, you fold out these panels here, and that tab will connect into that hole there. You then use a knee swivel, a very underutilized joint, to rotate the legs around and bring them down like so. Take this panel here, bring it down, and also fold it in like so. You want to bring these windows out. If you're at it, you can fold in these 2 silver panels here. Fold up these sections here, and that will allow you to do the whole Optimus extendo arm as you usually do. A lot of people have trouble getting the head out, because when they go to pull out, oh, fell off, oopsies. But actually there's a trick to it. If you untab this panel first, and then just keep rotating it down, it will push this head panel here without falling off. You then take this whole torso section and bring it up like so. Make sure the head's out of the way so you can take the entire torso section and rotate it 180 degrees. You then take this hinge over here and you rotate it back into the torso. The head folds up and tabs into place at the top, securing the whole section, which allows you to then bring in the chest details. You're going to want to bring these wheel sections in first, and then these panels here, and then these 2 hole sections will tab into these 2 pegs over here nice and solidly. If you're having trouble, make sure that these 2 are evenly spaced out. Just bring them out a little bit, which will allow that to peg in much more solidly. You can then bring the part that we used to untab the head down like that, just to rest back there. From the front, bring the arms down if you haven't already, and collapse these sections here. Don't use the bicep swivel, use the elbow swivel, and rotate these sections like so to line up the sculpting. And now for the most complicated section. Come around to the back here, untab the feet and rotate them down. You've got a teeny tiny peg there and a slot up here. This untabs from that and goes down into that, and that aligns the back section here with this panel there. So you take this section here, rotate it outwards, bring this whole section down, and when you do, make sure it's all nicely tabbed together on the 2 pegs there. And then whilst holding everything together, untab that and just fold it up into the leg like so to make a nice cohesive foot. From there you can rotate the foot and bring it down like that while still keeping that in space. And if you haven't already, bring this inwards. It already fell in whilst I was transforming it, but if it hasn't gone in, make sure that's in. And oh my word, these two look great! Hasbro really has mastered the art of a transformable Optimus Prime on two completely different levels, the simple and the complicated. These are both the same price point, they cost exactly the same, but they're so different and so unique, and that's something that I really like about that. So, here we have the two in robot mode, and I think the chunk factor got switched. Why is the Movieverse version blockier than the Siege version? I mean, I'm not complaining, but it definitely is a weird reversal. Again, it's not something you'd see in a vacuum, but side by side, it really does stick out. Starting off with Siege Prime, and, he's an Optimus for sure. Look, I don't mean to nitpick, but one thing that's always bugged me with this is how the figure has such a huge dichotomy between the robot and alt mode. Whilst it's somewhat possible to complain that the alt mode doesn't go far enough into being its own thing, at least it made an effort. This right here is just pure G1, without any care in the world. It's almost got more of the G1 essence than the MP10. So engineering aside, I can see why people would call this a downsized MP10. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, but given how cool the alt mode was, it would be nice to see some of those stylings carry over into the robot mode. It's actually something I find weird about the line as a whole. Sure, occasionally you get the perfect blend of old and new, such as Starscream and Ironhide, but aside from that, it's either a heavy focus on G1, or a huge contrast between inspired alt modes and the same old robot modes. I guess I can't complain though, as the fandom has been asking for chug-scaled masterpiece figures for years, and Hasbro listening to the majority makes sense. Still, putting that aside, how is the robot mode? It's good, really good. It's slim but heroic, stoic yet agile, familiar yet injecting a little bit of that Siege goodness into the surface detail. The head sculpt is spot on, and I'm pleased to report that the weathering detail is much more evenly spread this time. He even has the oh wait, never mind. At least his kibble is thoughtfully designed. The backpack works as a nice cohesive jetpack, like the one he borrowed from Sideswipe that one episode. If that doesn't work for you, you can always use the non-F kit for Sideswipe, as it's also compatible with Optimus Prime. Does the job well enough. Also, Optimus Prime isn't compatible with the stand. I mean, it's not that big of an issue, but it is kind of annoying. You come around the back here and you've got this hole that doesn't fit because it's far too tight, and then you go and open this up and you've got a hole that's far too loose and you have to open that anyway, and it's completely stupid. Even the arm kibble doubles as underarm Gatling guns, just like they did in the alt mode. Looks a tad messy, but it's a neat feature, and one that I hope to see in the comics, if they ever stop using the inferior toy as a character model. One of the more interesting parts is the wheel storage. Not only do they tuck away, but they make a statement. Somehow, against all the odds, they managed to cover up the hollowness. Now, I've never complained about the hollowness of the Titans Return toy, well, except for that one time, but seeing them take such care in such a small place, this really shows the commitment to the line. It is kinda sad, though, that Takara forgot to fold them out for the stock photography.
Why do they need that DeLorean thing in there?
Are you serious?
All in all, it is a great representation of Generation 1 Optimus Prime, and possibly even more fun than MP10. So, why do I sit here with a face of indifference? I mean, it didn't start out like that. Originally, I was really excited for it. Is it the oversaturation of G1? Have I reached my breaking point? I don't think so. G1 is just an aesthetic, and the only thing that makes an aesthetic properly or poorly executed is, well, the execution. It doesn't matter whether you're making an animated Ultra Magnus or a Studio Series Devastator, a good toy is a good toy. So, why am I left here with a feeling of emptiness? It's not even the comparison to the Studio Series one. This settled in days after I got him. I think it's important to bring in my favourite Voyager from the line in order to explain where I'm coming from. By all accounts, Starscream has more flaws. The paint's a little weak, the chest is loose, the legs are too lanky, and he is a shell former. So why do I prefer him on several levels to Optimus Prime? Well, it's the ideology of the designers. Starscream is breaking new ground, doing something bold and different. The engineering is about on par with Prime, but the sculpt is sharp and angular, and the posing is truly something else. What aesthetic take on G1 is the new Prime offering? Going for something rounded like Power of the Primes? Going for a mix of everything like the MP10? Overly toon accurate like the piece of MP44? Nope, it's just baseline G1. See, here's the problem. G1 is a starting point, a blank slate. You kind of have to put your own spin on it to truly bring it to life. I just don't think this Optimus does that. It wants to be G1. Okay, what kind of G1? I don't think the designers thought that far ahead. It's just a case of G1 sticking to G1 with a cool alt mode and more G1 and bam, done deal. Again, the figure isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but in terms of aesthetics in this mode, what does it actually bring to the table? Well, I can tell you what SS38 brings to the table: modernization. See, at least this figure knows what it wants to be, even if it doesn't quite achieve everything it wants in every possible way. Still, it's a hell of a time though, with its mechanical detailing and greebles. The head sculpt is serviceable. It doesn't quite get the subtle expressiveness of the on-screen model, plus there's no cat face, so it is a bit of a downer. I believe this is either a case of being too subtle for the mold to pick out, or another case of being based on concept art, and things being changed for the final CGI model, just like the inaccurate feet. Oh no! Whatever the case, it's serviceable, and it doesn't detract from everything else the figure does exceptionally well. The chest detailing is absolutely spectacular, harking back to his design from Dark of the Moon mixed with G1. I've seen people complain that it's not a truck grille like the original. Those people should probably shut up. This is definitely one of the best movie designs we've gotten. As is the case with pretty much all of the Bumblebee designs, minus the somewhat creepy Cybertronian ones, they carry across the alt mode in a clever yet realistic way. They look like a movie bot while still seeming to have understandable transformations. Good job, Travis. Now, Studio Series, give us Blitzwing already. The mold is far from perfect though. Whilst Siege Prime had ideological issues, SS38 has more tangible ones. The backpack is strikingly clean, covering up all the panels that fold into the chest and eliminating the possibility of a kibble backpack, which for a Studio Series toy is bloody amazing. The thing is, it has the same issue as Siege Sideswipe. The backpack juts out to the side further than the actual torso. On Sideswipe it's okay because the black sections allow the torso to be clearly defined, but on Prime they all end up being red. This means that when looking at him from directly at the front, he looks almost as chonky as Siege Ravage. Almost, but not quite. If given the option, I would have preferred the backpack just to jut out a little bit further, if it means having a slimmer profile from the front. Still, it's not the biggest issue, and given the insane parts count already, I don't think they could have fixed it. There are more frustrating cases of kibble anyway, such as the arms. I mean, I'm not angry or anything, but hey, kibble is kibble. When the rest of him is so well integrated, these end up sticking out like a sore thumb. I mean, it's far from the worst case of arm kibble in the line, and I've given a pass to those toys, so I guess it's alright. And hey, from the front the arms maintain his on-screen model profile to the T, aside from the lack of yellow paint apps on the sleeves. Bit bummed out about that. The moulding's there as if they intended to do it at some point, but I imagine they squeezed so much budget out of the engineering that the paint didn't get any afterwards. The major issue with the paint though would have to be the codpiece. The paint here is super weak and it chips off with almost the slightest flick. I didn't even notice it until Sentinel Reviews pointed it out in a message convo how he almost mutilated his through constant transformation. This pales in comparison to my main gripe of the figure though. How did the legs end up so weak? They look brilliant incorporating the kibble into the design seamlessly, and with pretty much no hollow parts from every angle. The problem is that they simply refuse to tab in together. Usually the legs have to be the most solid part of a Transformer, as they have to support the weight of the entire robot. This is why most Transformers have fairly simple leg transformations in comparison to the rest of the body. The legs here support the weight just fine, and you can pose them if you're careful, but out of the entire Studio Series line, this has to be the most fragile engineering section. Yes, I'd go as far as saying it's less solid than Camaro Bumblebee. The first one, not the clunker. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it's so bizarre. I've never seen something like this on a Transformer in my life. Every time you get stability issues with how everything tabs in, it's always from the torso up. This is a first, and I really hope something like this never happens again. As it stands, it's another blemish on a brilliant figure. You can be just going around minding your own business, and then bam, it falls apart and takes you out of the moment. Hang on, why am I getting deja vu again? Alright, looks like I just got myself a new that f***ing bitch! Warts and all though, this Prime is still truly an astonishing figure. The amount of detail on display is simply pushed to the max, without a second thought about how much greebilling detail they wanted to add. When you've got such an amazing reimagining of Optimus Prime with only two teeny tiny blemishes, how can you not behold him? Setting the two side by side, well, that's the difficult part. On one hand, you've got a perfectly adequate G1 Prime who works better as an action figure, and on the other hand, you've got a weird and wacky experimental Prime who doesn't quite nail the solidity aspect, but brings so much more to the table. One desperately tries to hide its alt mode, whereas the other shouts it loud and proud. Apparently, the deciding factor to some people are minor details such as the inclusion of an Autobot symbol and the addition of blue fists. No, seriously, that's what makes people prefer Siege over SS38. You can argue that one is better than the other, but symbols and fists? Really? Well, if you want an SS38 with Autobot symbols, Takara has the toy-accurate one coming out. Oh, wait, never mind.
If you bought this, smack yourself.
I suppose it's important to compare apples to apples where we can though, so how do the weapons hold up? Siege Prime comes with an axe and an ion blaster, and the axe kinda sucks. It starts off as a shield accessory, which looks really dumb. It really just acts as an excuse for the weapon storage. Terrible weapon storage. And then it opens up into a generic battle axe. You also have to fold it out in an incredibly specific way, otherwise it'll get stuck. Honestly though, it just isn't worth it. It's slightly too small to work as a huge battle axe and slightly too large to work as a throwing axe. The paint is also incredibly lackluster too. There's just nothing interesting about it. Even the Autobot symbol looks weak. Looks like they're paying homage to Sleep Convoy. Apparently the axe works as a gun as well. Barely. The Ion Blaster isn't much better, all hollow and lifeless. It does its job fine, but as far as guns go, even the Power of the Primes one has it beat. Hell, I'd say the Combiner Wars one had better guns for that matter. SS-38 goes for a much more simple approach. He's got a gun. It's a very nice gun. It's not really indicative of his original counterpart, but given how many guns he's had over the years, there's no reason he can't have one like this. Coincidentally, they both have two 5mm ports on the back to store the weapons, but only Siege Prime is able to utilize both of them, given that he has two weapons, whereas SS-38 only has one. Siege Prime also has way more 5mm ports to combine with all the weaponizers, but really that's another story for another time. If I had to compare weapons to weapons, I'd say that they're evenly matched. SS-38 has more solid guns, but Siege just comes with more. Pick your poison, I guess. I guess it all comes down to this: the articulation. Who has more posing power than the other? Well, we'll start off with the one that was released first. Siege Prime starts off with a ball-jointed head, and that actually brings up an interesting point I've been meaning to talk about. Outside of the heads, none of the Siege figures in deluxe or higher size classes feature ball joints. This is actually a conscious decision to feel more premium by the Takara designers, because apparently people were constantly complaining about how cheap the ball joints were. Can't say I know why.
There was an interview with the Takara team that said that none of the Siege line uses ball joints because of the necessity of the extra weight from the parts that are put on.
We met with them in Japan, and they went through kind of their list of challenges, and part of the mission was different types of design of joints. Now you'll see ball joints still on Studio Series and some other types of characters, but because they have to hold all of the extra weight of all of those customized pieces, you have to be able to have the character like sideswipe support all that way.
Anyway, I'm getting off track. The arms move slightly back due to transformation and are on universal joints. He has a bicep swivel, elbows that get just beyond 90, and he has a nice wrist swivel. The waist swivels with no problems. He has universal hips, a thigh swivel, a knee bend that gets well beyond 90 without being hollow, a knee swivel due to transformation, and a 45-degree ankle tilt. Under normal circumstances, I'd say this is pretty solid, but given the kind of shit we've had to put up in Power of the Primes, it's actually pretty damn amazing. Next to Siege Starscream though, well, he may have the knee swivel, but Starscream has him beat in the knee bend and feet department. Now, what about SS-38? Well, coincidentally, he also has only one ball joint on his design, located on his head. It's far more limited though. The shoulders sadly don't move back thanks to the torso mass, but his smokestacks do rotate down to become guns. Why? The shoulders are on universal joints, but to access them, you have to move these top panels out of the way. Nice touch. He has a bicep swivel, and the elbows get, again, a little beyond 90 degrees. He also has a wrist swivel, like the Siege version, but one thing the Siege version doesn't have is an elbow swivel. You get surprisingly more use out of it than you'd expect. If you're careful with the hip skirts, the waist swivels without any issues, and said hip skirts move out of the way to allow the full range of outward motion in the universal joints, which also move forward all the way. He has a thigh swivel and a knee bend that gets just under what the Siege version has. Sadly, it also breaks the sculpt. It tries not to, but it still breaks the sculpt. Finally, the ankle has a much more limited tilt, but it also gets some foot rotation, similarly to Siege Starscream. With extra foot and elbow posability, honestly the two are neck and neck when it comes to the posing department. This, as does many things, makes comparing the two prohibitively difficult. Size comparisons are not one of those things though. It's clear that SS-38 has much more plastic quality and chunk. You could argue that the Siege one shifts more of its budget into the weapons and paints, and you'd be right on the first count, but the two have comparatively the same amount of paint applications. Let's just face it, SS-38 just gives you more toy. And that's really what it boils down to in the end. Siege Prime aims low and reaches its goals. It goes for one thing, G1 and nothing else. It's a celebration of a small window in time, and as such it knows it doesn't have to do much to please. It's an Optimus Prime, fans already love him. Plus, call me crazy, but if we're considering chug G1 styled Optimus Primes, I kinda prefer the Classics version.
What?
This really isn't nostalgia talking. I've never had this figure as a kid growing up. I've always wanted one, but my family was on a budget. Music lessons are expensive. After getting my hands on one last year, and after doing a little tweaking to meet my aesthetic tastes, I can see that he has really aged well. And don't get me wrong, Siege Prime will also age like fine wine, but again, it's just a case that the predecessor was trying to do more with the G1 source material. It had something to prove. Classics was supposed to be a filler line before the movie came out, so it needed to justify its existence through engineering and nothing else. Siege Prime, well, it's good, but it doesn't really bring anything new to the table. And if you're looking for a completely G1 experience at a chug scale, there are better options out there. Not official options, and they are more expensive, but there are options. Bumblebee Prime is different though. He is a celebration of everything the franchise represents, as evidenced by the callbacks to both G1 and the '07 movie poses. He is Optimus Prime to every age group, and he needs to prove that he can hold the weight of an entire franchise on his shoulders. Travis Knight doesn't just care about the classics 80s shows, he cares for all the fans, and this toy shows what can happen when you open your mind to everything the media franchise has to offer. There's callbacks to so many versions of the character here, and although he's technically not as solid, the sheer audacity of the designers at every turn makes this figure something truly special. But I suppose that comes down to a personal question. Is it better to succeed at a lower level or fail to a certain extent at a higher one? Now, my own motto in life is to have grandiose plans and try to reach them, and just figure out how to make compromises along the way. Siege Optimus Prime just doesn't seem to be on the same wavelength as me, and you could argue that he's not for me because I didn't grow up with G1. Except I did. Much of my exposure to the other elements of the franchise was through the website, the Hasbro official Transformers website, and they had every single show previously released on there, except for the Japanese ones. So aside from animated on Cartoon Network, I also grew up on Car Robots, Robots in Disguise, I have to specify that now thanks to the recent series, Cybertron, and of course, G1. G1 was a part of my childhood just as it was with many fans, so saying that this figure isn't for me because I have no nostalgia, that's not correct. And I have to preface, nostalgia shouldn't change what a toy does. What does this toy do? It's a solid toy, but it just seems to be playing it safe. It does feel ridiculously G1, but only in aesthetic, not in essence. Now SS-38, on the other hand, oozes the essence of G1, and the movies, and Armada, and Cybertron, and every single continuity in between. He is a celebration of everything Optimus Prime. As time passes, I really think this will go down in history as the definitive Voyager Optimus Prime mold. He may not be perfect, but what he represents is so much more special. Even if you don't collect Studio Series, I urge you to pick up Optimus Prime, because he really is worth it. In fact, while you're at it, pick up Bumblebee, he's also adorable. I might actually do another one of these Versus reviews in the future, but I can't really do that until the other Barricade comes out, so we'll just have to wait for that. So until then, fortune favours the bold. Take a page out of SS-38's book, and leave your mark on the...
You're a f***ing idiot! You got it all wrong!
How have I got this all wrong?
Oh my god, you're such a simpleton. Let me put it this way. Siege Prime is more G1, right?
But that doesn't necessarily make it better. G1 isn't a positive, it's not a negative either, it's just an aesthetic.
You're not getting it at all! For God's sake! Okay, let's try this again. Siege Optimus Prime, the Voyager, is more accurate to the G1 cartoon, am I correct?
Yes.
And the G1 cartoon is the birthplace of all the Transformers, right?
Well, not really if you count...
Therefore, it's better!
Oi mate, you can't just cut off the jingle!
I can't win with you, you're so dumb! Have you been lobotomized or something? Oh, for God's sake! Blue hands! They didn't even have blue hands!
Well, I guess you can't win them all. This is Rich from Review Tech USA signing off. Have a good one! Okay, just a quick special thanks to Leonard J. Oliver, a lovely gentleman who took my thumbnail that I posted on social media ahead of time and turned it into this cool little battle scene. I thought I should include it in the video somehow because it really does look quite cool. Aside from that, if you're watching this before the 13th and the 14th of July, I'm going to be at Smash Anime Convention at the Sydney Convention Centre all day, both days, so if you'd like to see me there, head on over and just say hi. Love to chat with you for a bit. Until then, well, I guess it's back to work on more videos. See you later.